Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Rabia. I'm the Customer Service Manager here at Charity Digital. First of all, I would like to say that I'm hosting this webinar from my home office, and as so many of us are working from home right now, I'd like to apologise for any outages or disruptions. My colleagues are in the back and they are poised and ready to jump in to tackle any technical issues. If you find that the feed interrupts so that you're not catching anything, please just let us know. I'm very pleased to welcome you to today's webinar titled How 2021 May Become the Most Digital Fundraising Year Ever. It's a very timely subject as we head into a second year of this new reality, of all these changes, and we wanted to address how charities can best engage with their supporters to continue their valuable work. We are joined today by Steve Normile from the nonprofits team at AWS and Caroline Rennie, the director of Serverless. I'd like to thank you both, Steve and Caroline, for joining us today and providing your expertise. Steve and Caroline have prepared an in-depth presentation about how to make the most of your charity's data and harness its power to drive your digital fundraising in 2021. I think that's everything, and I'm now going to hand over to Steve. Thank you.
So thanks, Rabia, and thank you for the introduction. So as Rabia said, my name is Steve Normile. I am an account manager here at Amazon Web Services, and I work specifically in our dedicated UK non-profits team. So we look after charities and non-profits of all sizes and shapes. And so I'm delighted to be joining you today as we explore what digital fundraising may look like in 2021. Today, we're going to look at how everything that has happened over the last 12 months or so is impacting our sector, how digital experience impacts our lives and why it matters today more than ever. We'll be joined by our close friend, Caroline Rennie, who will talk through the top things to think about and give some real life examples to help you on your journey to digital. And then finally, we'll recap the important role that data plays, often data already you have within your organization to creating a better experience for your users and donors. And as Rabia said, please remember to use the chat box to ask questions throughout, and we'll try and pick those up as either as we go along or towards the end of the session. And perhaps just include your name and organization as well. That would be really useful to understand. So we'll begin with the changing dynamics for the sector. This data is taken from the coronavirus briefing that was issued by the Charities Aid Foundation last year, just after our first lockdown period, and was based on 2 surveys that they carried out across the UK. Now, there's been lots of surveys since, and there's lots of data out there, and it's all very similar in terms of the data points that it presents. So we can use this data as an indication on the ongoing impact that's being felt. 53% of charities reported a decline in charitable giving, which is significant. It's huge. It's a massive loss of income under any circumstances, but sadly leads to almost 1/3 of charities reporting that without additional financial support, they predict severe disruption to their services. In other words, they might not survive more than 12 months. And all of this, of course, is underscored by the impact of increasing demand. More than 1/3 of charities report having an increase in demand as a direct result of the effects of the pandemic in the last 12 months. And I'm sure these numbers are representative of those of you on the webinar today. And if we also note that only 63% of charities report having any ability to accept digital donations, we can see the importance of digital fundraising is clear. And so to think about digital fundraising, we perhaps should begin by thinking about digital experiences that engage the donor. We live in a time where we increasingly expect, perhaps have even become reliant on our ability to do whatever we need to do, whenever we choose to do it, and however we choose to get it done. If we think about things like banking or exercising, enjoying TV or films, even hailing a cab or doing our food shopping, the way that we do things has never been so reliant on our service providers making their products and services as accessible as they can be, and all whilst making us, the consumer, feel like an experience is very specific and very personal. With the obvious need to shift away from mass audience events, the opportunity to create repeatable experiences, perhaps tailored to the individual's needs, their likes and even dislikes, feels increasingly important. And no matter what your size as an organisation, from the large charitable brands to local community-based non-profits, organisations often hold data about donors and fundraisers, perhaps service users, volunteers and staff. But I wonder how many organisations are making use of that data to support their organisation's decision making, using the data to improve your ability to deliver against your mission, or perhaps transforming fundraising efforts. You see, the data you hold is rich and valuable, and it probably holds the keys to unlocking or even beginning your journey towards digital success. The challenge, and therefore the opportunity, is to understand what the data is, how it can be used, and then using the data to create new models of working. And whilst it can and most definitely should go much further than just this alone, it could help you to think differently about your organisation's fundraising. And so, whilst we recognise the importance of digital, how you deliver digital matters too. Caroline will talk a little bit more about the Comic Relief journey in a short while, but I just wanted to highlight that the digital fundraising journey is not a one-size-fits-all approach, and that the need to change and think differently along the way is just as important in order to achieve real benefits. So it's a constant journey, it's a constant process of thinking. At Comic Relief, for example, the journey didn't end by simply creating a digital donation solution. By continuing to look at how to make best use of technology available to them and forward thinking about how technology was enabling a better experience for them and their donors, Comic Relief were able to evolve the donation solution to the extent of reducing costs by 93% and ensuring that they had the ability to cope with the huge demand generated during a very specific time-bound fundraising opportunity, as we all know, the annual night of TV. Comic Relief are a brilliant example of how, by using the building blocks available to anyone, it's possible to create a donation solution that provides the functionality decided upon by you and that you create from start to finish. Whereas our friends at Just Giving, who support millions of users, have built a solution that enables both fundraisers and charities to engage directly with specific functionality that's been built to support charities engage with, understand, and audit their fundraising activities. By building out a platform made available to all, Just Giving, who use AWS services, can scale fast and deal with unexpected demand, provide access to complex analytical services, and take away the worry about agility, performance, or reliability. But no single approach will work for everyone. And so I'm delighted to introduce Caroline Rennie, who has many years' experiences in helping to develop technology solutions to support charitable missions, to talk through the things to think about on your journey to digital. Caroline.
Thanks, Steve, and hi, everybody. So just to start off, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Caroline Rennie, one of the directors at We Are Serverless. There's no shameless sales pitch. If you think we could help your organisation, drop me an email at caroline@weareserverless.com or hit me up on LinkedIn or Twitter if you'd like to chat through some of your challenges. We Are Serverless is a development agency focusing on moving organisations from traditional architecture to lighter weight infrastructure and helping teams adopt a serverless mindset. As a team, we've built products that have processed over £85 million of charitable donations, and our main strength is building products which can scale to high volume events, such as TV broadcast appeals, whilst still providing a year-round availability for fundraising. Before founding We Are Serverless, I worked for 4 years in the digital product team at Comic Relief. Some of the advice and anecdotes I draw upon today will be from that time, but also many insights from different organisations I've worked with. Some of the talk will go a bit technical, but I want to make sure that I'm not assuming any base knowledge on the technical chat. So apologies for the number of terrible analogies I will use, and if I oversimplify at times. For the webinar today, I've broken the session down into 3 parts. I really encourage you to check your questions in the chat as we go, and we'll pick them up in the Q&A at the end. Part 1 will be some housekeeping, by which I mean giving you some tools to do some self-evaluation of your current technical landscape and to better understand your internal digital culture. Next up, I'm going to cover some principles of when to build digital solutions and when to buy them, and finishing up with some practical ways you can start applying some of the lessons from the session and some recommended tools to get you started. Right, so first up, we've got housekeeping. sorry, Steve, can you go? Yeah. Understanding where you're starting from is important. Knowing what tools you already have at your disposal to test your digital fundraising concepts means you can get to a minimal viable solution much quicker than if you're starting from scratch. Before kicking off a new digital initiative within your organization, ask yourself the following questions from this checklist. My first question is, what is our current online presence? So do you have a single website, multiple microsites, e-commerce site, huge social following? And does each of your channels have a distinct purpose, or is it a little bit scattergun? The second question is, do we have editorial control over our online content? So that means, does your website have a content management system or CMS? Does anyone in your organization know how to use it? Is the site built with quite strict templates, or is it quite flexible to your content needs? And basically, is our website suitable for testing within? Third question is, how do we collect payments? And it's quite an important one, especially for digital fundraising. Is it card and PayPal payments? Do we have just giving? What about Facebook donates? Or is there an e-commerce site? SMS payments are actually one of the biggest payments that Comic Relief used to have. And is there a way to digitize direct debits? How much control do you have over your payment methods? So, fourth question, where does the data go when a user engages with us? Does it all live in the source systems? For example, does Just Giving data just stay on Just Giving? Do you track some activity using Google Analytics but don't collect personal data? Or if you're lucky, you're working in a beautifully architected and easy to use customer relationship management system, which is drawing from a single customer view. The final question is, if we had 100,000 users respond to our activity, what needs to happen to support their experience? How are our products hosted? Would it cost more to have lots of traffic at once? And are there downstream systems and processes which our organization could struggle with if we were having this volume through? So thinking about your supporter care or your finance team. In answering these questions, I'm not intending to give you 1,000 reasons why you shouldn't try out new digital fundraising approaches. I'm hoping that lots of those questions have helped you appreciate how much power you already have in your digital arsenal. If you're working with agencies, it's really important that they understand what you already have available to avoid duplication and waste. On the final question around dealing with scale, I feel it's really important to consider how you could use managed or third-party services to de-risk your activity, but there'll be more on that later. So, one of the highest important housekeeping questions to ask yourself and your organization is whether you are approaching your digital offering with a product or a project mindset. So what are the differences? Let's start potentially with the more familiar project delivery. If your organization has a project delivery culture around digital projects, you're likely to have some of the following behaviors. So what you're delivering will be time-bound with an end deliverable. There's a clear scope at the beginning of the project, and you're working within really strict budgets. Now, what do I mean by product delivery? Product mindset and product delivery is all about embracing the unknown and finding out ways to solve your users' problems in an iterative way. Behaviors that product cultures produce include continuous delivery, changing scope over time, and budgets set on usage or performance. Now, I'm pretty sure my bias is showing a little here, but here's why I believe project delivery cultures are one of the biggest blockers to digital fundraising success. First off, with a project culture delivering the thing, it's the biggest milestone. It'll always be towards the end of the time you spend working on the project, and therefore actual user engagement is secondary to delivery. My second point is performance and analytics are rearview mirror activities. You set your desired outcomes in the initial scoping, and after launch, the project will either meet target or not meet target. Finally, everyone leaves baby in the corner, which means does your organization have quite a few skeletons in the closet from past projects which are just still knocking around? Without full product lifecycle ownership, digital projects have a habit of lurking around, uncared for, and cluttering up your digital presence. Without viewing your digital assets as ongoing products with continuous potential to engage new audiences, we fall into the biggest trap of project culture. queuing up a huge backlog of projects, which means that even if project A has exceeded expectations in performance, we're knee-deep in project C by the time we realise. By leaning into continuous delivery, allowing scope to change as data educates us about real user behaviour, we're able to deliver value iteratively, pivoting when the unexpected hits, and avoiding an attitude where the assumptions we had at the beginning of a project will all pay out in one big bang at the end. Right, so that's my little soapbox speech over. It's time to go deeper into the woods for part 2, which is build versus buy. Right, so I appreciate I've set myself up here in a classic binary argument of A versus B. Something I'd like to emphasize from the outset is that as a charity or an organization that isn't a tech giant, you should be buying more than you're building. What's more, when you're buying something, make sure any customization you're requesting is because you have truly unique need. And this customization will add tangible value to your organization and end users. Speaking in this webinar as a director of a development agency, that seems quite strange advice. So I'd like to go into a little example where this approach has worked in saving excess bespoke development in a use case we worked on recently. With the right partnerships and willingness to try new approaches, digital fundraising can be hugely successful for an organization who is starting with just the simplest of digital building blocks. Taking a minimal approach, I'd like to quickly run through a working example of how one organisation raised 6.7 million euros online, and that was between November 27th and December the 16th of 2020, with a starting point in October 2020 with no online donation mechanism. We Are Serverless worked to support a fantastic collaboration between the Irish broadcaster RTE and the Community Foundation for Ireland. In response to the utter shit show that was 2020, and this is not their technical terminology for the event, RTE had decided to use their most popular show of the year, the Late Late Toy Show, as an opportunity to raise funds for children's charities around Ireland, and we're partnering with Community Foundation for Ireland in order to distribute the funds. We Are Serverless built the application which would take payments from within RTE's web pages and would be paid out through Stripe, the payment service provider, directly into Community Foundation for Ireland's restricted funding bank account. Working in collaboration took a lot of the risk out of the project and reduced the development requirements. So Community Foundation for Ireland didn't need to worry about website scaling. RTE's site has over 25 million monthly page views, and they're set up to manage broadcast-driven online activity. RTE didn't need to worry about handling millions of euros of donations because Community Foundation for Ireland have 20 years of experience managing and all the infrastructure for distributing grants. We Are Serverless only needed to build the very bespoke need to process high volume donations, and only did so after assessing that there was no off-the-shelf product that would meet the scaling requirements. Excuse me. The alternative of approaching the project without doing an initial checklist of what was already available within the digital arsenal of the partnership could have resulted in a massively overinflated build. Starting from scratch would have introduced huge risk to the delivery of a successful campaign, and integrating the bespoke technology into existing building blocks was a really cost-effective way to facilitate fundraising. So, buyer's guide. The simplest way to avoid overspending on tech is to find great software as a service, or SaaS for short, which meets your needs. A distinction I feel is really important here is the difference between software as goods compared to software as a service. Some red flags to look out for and advice on how to make the most out of freemium models to get the best bang for your buck. So again, it's very easy for me to present these decisions as binary. There are middle ground options and blended models that can work, but for the sake of time, here's why I believe SaaS products are the best option, especially for those on a tight budget. So first off, how do you tell them apart? So I'm going to start off with your sort of window shopping. The traditional software suppliers will not have something that you can pick up and try out for yourself. Instead, you're likely to be asked to book in a demo so that their sales team can understand what your needs are and advise you why their product can be configured to meet them. Software as a service is likely to have a free trial, which you can get started with straight away. The freemium model or the subscription model will mean that you will not get that face-to-face interaction with the sales team, but the product will be well documented. Another point to note is that SaaS providers are not going to respond to your tender. The reason why they're more affordable is because there's an expectation that you're willing to do the legwork on evaluating the product. Now for the contract and costs. When licensing software, you're likely to have a 12-month minimum terms. There may be price per license or just a set fee regardless of usage. With SaaS products, the pay-as-you-go pricing will often unlock features at different tiers. This allows you to scale your costs with your needs, and most importantly, cancel if the tool is no longer relevant for you. Many SaaS products will have enterprise-level pricing once you're hitting certain usage thresholds. But compared to the total onboarding and contracted costs of licensed software, you're likely to still be saving on overall costs. Once you've got your internal sign-off on using the software, you'll either, in the software as a product world, be dependent on an implementation partner, the team that will actually deliver the instance of Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics or whichever software you've purchased. Or if you're using a software as a service product, you'll just plug in your credit card details and you're good to go. To integrate into your other systems, most SaaS products will have low or no code integrations and APIs, which mean you can transfer the product's data within your digital ecosystem with ease. One potential sticking point, and one which I've experienced, is that some organizations don't really enjoy SaaS products because of that being on a monthly subscription on a card rather than invoicing, but they are at a significantly lower cost. So enjoy that argument with your finance team. And the final difference I wanted to highlight is how maintenance and upgrades are managed. Software as a good provisioning means an implementation partner has configured your instance of the software in a particular way. Once deployed, upgrades and maintenance may require intervention from your implementation partner to keep your instance in line with the latest versioning. Software as a service will automatically upgrade with the main product. This means that occasionally features which are underutilized may be retired, but the plus side is that new features are automatically introduced to all users of the product. It's not often that highly valuable features will be removed from a product, but there are risks if you're using the software in a less conventional way compared to the majority of users, that feature could be removed. So what are some examples of software as a service which you could be using? So these are some brilliant examples of SaaS products, but which you've likely heard of. JustGiving, anyone on this call who hasn't heard of them might be quite surprised in the digital fundraising space, but they're a prominent market leader in the peer-to-peer fundraising space. And it seems like an absolute no-brainer to use them. However, many leading charities have tried to build their own peer-to-peer fundraising experience for themselves. Some of the rationale is that building gives you full control over the user journey and the ability to capture the exact data that you need for your organization. Reasons why these builds often fail is that in-house or agency capability and capacity simply doesn't compete with JustGiving. Users are really familiar with JustGiving, and getting to feature parity can be excruciatingly slow. The next SaaS product I love is Shopify. It's an off-the-shelf e-commerce platform which has really simplified setting up an online shop. If you are looking for a great example of off-the-shelf APIs, Shopify can connect with other payment service providers. So if you've got a good rate, for example, with someone like Stripe, you can integrate with that in a couple of clicks. And also most fulfillment houses, so if you are using it for selling merchandise, will know how to pull order data from Shopify without requiring time-consuming custom development. A bit more of an internal tool, but Freshdesk is great if your digital activity may increase your inbound queries. Remember question 5 from our housekeeping checklist. Who may be impacted if 100,000 users were to use our product? Freshdesk gives customer support really easy to use interface for high volume inbound queries. At Comic Relief, we launched Freshdesk for supporter care in 2020, and it helped improve efficiency for that team by probably 20 to 25%. Segment is a SaaS product, which I've added here as a potential solution if you're struggling with the question of where does the data go from our housekeeping checklist. If you have a disparate data ecosystem where the majority of your data is held within source systems, this could be a good solution for you to investigate how a low-code option for building out a single customer view. So developing a digital culture that puts SaaS as the default and only builds to facilitate genuinely unique selling points will help your organisation get from an idea to live production faster and at a much lower cost than building from scratch or customising traditional software. If you're looking to try new things in 2021, get to a first iteration with SaaS and only start bespoke development when that product is no longer meeting your needs. At this point, if you're building either in-house or with an agency, it's also important to understand how they will be building with buying. So it's not always possible to find the perfect off-the-shelf solution for your needs. So when it comes to customization, building in-house or with an agency, make sure you're using the right tools to hit the ground running rather than starting from scratch. So I'm just using an example from Comic Relief here. So using managed cloud services such as Amazon Web Services can accelerate your development speed and add value to your users and your organization faster. Drawing on an example from Comic Relief, I just want to show the kinds of managed services which are utilized in the donation digital product. First off, let's think about the front end. This is built in React by Comic Relief developers, but it's actually powered by the content management service Contentful. Next, how do we manage payments? You can use payment service providers. This application, the Comic Relief donation platform, actually has 5 different payment service providers integrated with it, but I'm just highlighting on Stripe and PayPal because they're super easy to use. So finally, I wanted to stop with Amazon Web Services, which are basically the glue that holds a lot of the pieces together. Whether it's the API gateway, AWS, Lambda functions, database solutions, file storage, or using Pinpoint to send out confirmation emails, using AWS means that your developers have ready-to-use solutions to so many solved problems in tech. For those of you who are wondering what day-to-day usage of AWS might look like for your organization, it's likely that you're already using solutions powered by Amazon Web Services. Sorry, Steve, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, but you can do that without actually being at the coalface within AWS. I recommended Shopify as one of the SaaS products earlier, and parts of Shopify are powered by AWS. But as the end user of their software as a service, you don't have to have any AWS technical expertise to make use of that tool. So now for the final part of my talk, which is just around rapid testing and tools. Remember during our housekeeping and those 5 questions to ask before kicking off a project, it's time to dust them off and see how we can build an effective digital fundraising test, no matter your starting point. Also, the analogies that I warned you about at the beginning are about to get a lot weirder. Sorry about that. So let's start with the Wizard of Oz test. Setting up an experience which looks like a fully functional product to the end user, but doesn't necessarily have everything plumbed in at the back end. This is one of my favorite ways to get a product concept live and tested with real users as quickly as possible. I've always heard other names for this approach, like minimal viable testing, but I prefer the Wizard of Oz analogy. When running through the checklist of questions, if you find yourself hitting blockers to progress because of your current technical stack, I want you to think about how you might test out new ideas without requiring an all-singing, all-dancing solution. This is your Wizard of Oz test. If you have an idea that you think has potential, but are being advised that build time would be months, there will be a way to pull a test together to get a proof of concept. For this example, I wanted to show how I would pull together a digital fundraising test if my organization didn't have editorial control over our main website through a CMS, and if we didn't have payment methods. So using Shopify, I was able to build a shop in around 2 minutes. I would be able to create a relevant URL for my charity, either using the myshopify.com domain, where you can have, so charity.a.myshopify.com domain, or I can set up a subdomain from my main charity URL within the new shop. All of this is features within Shopify, and that might take a little bit longer than 2 minutes, but not by much. From here, I can create content pages, product pages, use off-the-shelf payment options, and get new signups to my newsletter. Now, if you're thinking, surely it's not that easy, this is exactly the method that Comic Relief used when launching the popular Charlie Mackesy collaboration, which was a merchandise collaboration in April 2020. The test enabled rapid launch, and as the popularity grew, we were able to easily migrate to different fulfillment partners as sales volumes grew, because Shopify is a specialist in that field. The merchandise range grossed over £1 million, was exclusively available online, and the tech cost $299 per month. Wizard of Oz testing is a great way to get users on your product without needing to have full end-to-end integration within your operating model. Testing this way means you are injecting some technical debt at the beginning of the product lifecycle. That's where this particular testing method gets into a bit of a sticky situation. Once you're up and running, if your test has been successful, you need to figure out how you'll integrate with the wider business tools. So next up, Apollo 13 tools. Apollo 13 ground control had the challenge to get a square peg into a round hole. This is how you end up feeling when your technical stack is misaligned and sharing data across products is seen as insurmountable challenge rather than a great opportunity. Tech debt accrued during Wizard of Oz testing, which particularly neglects backend integration, that tech debt is because those integrations don't intrinsically hold immediate value to end users. But you do need to deal with that technical debt within the sort of second or third iteration of that product if the proof of concept has been successful. I think Steve alluded to this earlier about user expectations of how their data can be used to improve experiences is really high now. We can thank organizations like Amazon, Netflix, Spotify for making recommendations which know us better than we know ourselves, even if that is entirely creepy. The fact is, many users are now used to the concept of the value exchange, where their data is a point of value, which they can derive better services with. Whether your lack of backend integration is because of your testing or just organic technical growth, the fact is many charities struggle to create single customer view in order to deliver the kinds of personalization end users now expect. Without an underlying data alignment, working with quick-to-use tools and software as a service products can result in even greater silos of data. So how can we improve interoperability across user engagement points to give our users the best possible experience? Certain software designs, and this is predominantly software as a good design, is designed to take over your organization's central nervous system. If you're working within the constraints of those one ring to rule them all systems, it can be really difficult to introduce other data sources to that central nervous system. Tools like segment.com, which I mentioned earlier, are good for combining data from multiple sources and can be rolled out iteratively across your data sets. So rather than having a more traditional 12 to 18 month data warehouse project, you'll have be able to roll out a low and no code integration with data sources, but also the data destinations. So it's one thing to capture all the data in one place, but what we really need to do to achieve that user experience expectation is to be able to then serve that data relevantly in our other products. So that's your email marketing provider or Facebook ads. Because you can combine these data points from the different sources, you can then deliver a much richer end experience to your users. On a slightly less technical and scary note, I think a really important tool, which is very much underused, and one which hopefully lots of you are able to pick up and run with quite quickly, is improving your usage of Google Analytics. With proper setup and training, you can gain really great insights out of GA, but a lot of organizations peak at sort of examining page views and session time. There's also really great tools like Google Optimize, which allow you to set up A/B testing with no code. If your organization is one with multiple microsites, it can be quite challenging to manage Google Analytics across all those different domains. So wherever possible, I really recommend harnessing your main organization domain across all your products. So my final point for the presentation, and possibly my most obscure film tangent yet, is Moneyball thinking. If I can get Steve to, yeah. So Moneyball thinking is an approach I'm recommending for digital fundraisers for 2021. Those of you who aren't diehard sports film fans like me, the premise of Moneyball and Oakland Athletics general manager Billy Beane is that success can be achieved if you focus on the right, simple metric. In baseball, that metric was getting on base. For you as digital fundraisers, I would recommend that your metric is conversion rate of visit to transaction. Most organizations love to tout data as being really important to their decision making, but struggle to pick which data point is most relevant to their needs. Higher availability of data from across the entire user journey means we can become overwhelmed with which key performance indicator or KPI is actually key. From the session so far, I focused a lot on practicalities and technical how you could do digital fundraising, but I wanted to finish by bringing home the importance of what we need to measure when we're building experiences for our supporters. So why am I picking that metric? Why do I go for conversion to transaction over average gift value or email signups or total social reach? And it's because the beauty of digital products is that they are scalable. If you can build an experience that converts a higher percentage of users to a transaction, then you can invest confidently in marketing to increase volume of visitors and lead to overall increase of revenue. Digital fundraising needs to have clear financial objectives. If you're pivoting your definition of success during your testing, you're building for a moving target. Cool. So that's all I've got prepared for you so far. I appreciate that I've gone through a lot of content and hopefully it's been useful for you. I'm just going to go back to Rabia I think we're managing our Q&A now.
Thanks, Caroline. Just one or two more slides from me, and then we'll move on to it's okay, and then we'll move on to the Q&A. So thanks, Caroline. I think as we start to think about what you already have, and I think that's a really clear message from Caroline's discussion there, right at the top and all the way throughout. It's about what you already have and what do you think that you need, and how do you prove what you need, and how do you turn that into something that's tangible and a project to focus on. I think that's really important as you start to think about those steps towards digital fundraising. And it can also be underpinned by understanding the value of the data that you already hold. So if we bring those two together, actually, that's quite a powerful mix and a great starting point to begin the journey at the end of today's session. We have the ability not only to build a fuller picture of donors and users, but opening up and understanding data, you gain usable insights that can help you to understand gaps, problems, patterns that will ease or improve the donor journey. Data is more than just a commodity. When placed at the center of an organization's approach, it benefits collaboration, communication, and the effectiveness of the decisions that you make. And in a year like no other, data can help you to unlock the most digital fundraising year ever. And so as we think about what comes next, I'd like to make the offer to co-innovate with you. We work, as Caroline pointed out, at Comic Relief and many organizations, we act as the glue that brings some of this stuff together. We work with 1,600 plus partners that are used to working with public sector organizations and not-for-profit organizations too. And we have our marketplace that gives you access to many of the software as a service solutions that Caroline alluded to there in her presentation. And we're here to help you understand how best to access, utilize, and understand all of what is available to you. My email address is on the screen. I'd be delighted if you reached out to me and we can begin having that conversation, whether it be myself or a member of the team that I'm part of, about how you can make digital part of your strategy for 2021 and beyond. And then as we get ready for questions, I'd just like to highlight a few links that you might find useful as you start to think about the next steps. Firstly, AWS has a number of programs and opportunities to help organizations just like yours benefit from using technologies, including ours. And you can find access to our charitable credit program here on Charity Digital. We offer all charities, no matter what size or scale they are, $2,000 worth of credit to support them in using our solutions and beginning that journey. You'll find the link to the credit program that can be accessed through Charity Digital on screen. You can also visit our website for more information, and also our blog, where we keep everyone updated as to what not-for-profit organisations are doing in the UK and around the globe. And with that, Raib, I think we hand back to you and we can hopefully answer some questions. So thank you very much.
Hi, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Caroline. That was so interesting. And I really enjoyed all of your movie references. I think that really was great. I just wanted to let everyone know that, as Steve mentioned, yes, Amazon is available through Charity Digital Exchange. And if you have any questions, you can get through to Charity Digital Exchange directly via our website. at charitydigitalexchange.org, and you'll probably come through to me or one of my colleagues, and we'll help you get onto ordering your software. And so lots of questions. We're going to jump straight in, and we're going to start with Margaret Young, who asks, is there a scope/scale thing to this? For a small or startup charity, would the cost perhaps outweigh the benefit? Do you have any stats on the rate of return? And she thanks you in advance.
I think I've not quite followed the full question, but I guess it's like with a lot of the products that I sort of discussed, you're looking at the sort of the lower tier side of things being around $30 a month. So that's the benefit, that ideally you're not having this big upfront outlay of costs for an implementation partner, for example. And then if that product isn't working for you, you're not seeing the return for investment, you can cancel. So I think hopefully that's answered the question, but do let me know, Margaret, if not.
Yeah, and I would just reiterate really Caroline's response there, in that most of these solutions, and certainly with many of the customers that we work with, the big benefit of working in the cloud is the cost as you consume model. So the pay as you go, and most of the solutions that Caroline's referenced in terms of those third-party components in building that end-to-end digital fundraising solution often follow the same model. So it's worth exploring. But yeah, you tend to pay for what you use rather than that big upfront investment. There are other examples, of course, there always is, but predominantly speaking, that's the advantage.
Brilliant, thank you. It's nice to know that charities have that sort of flexibility where you can kind of try things and move on to things that work better for you, a lot more than that sort of old school, now we've signed up, now we're committed. So it's good to know that that's not the situation across the board. Okay, so our next question is from Paul from City Harvest London, who sort of asks whether you have a view on the trends on which platforms are growing or declining in fundraising behavior, such as direct versus indirect, such as Just Giving, versus direct debit versus SMS, etc. And if a charity was to focus on one or two, what would they be? Which would you recommend?
I think something which I've always believed is that it is much more challenging to convince someone to fundraise than it is to donate. I am happy to be shouted down by the digital expertise that I know, the fundraising expertise I know is on this call, but the effort of having that community instigator, and I think especially in our current climate, I think it really is important to have that direct to donor experience being your priority, rather than going for the fundraising as having the fundraiser who is within their community. I think that's just because of the current lockdown, because things like mass participation events aren't really on. There have been obviously examples of huge success, but I think it's more they're the exception, not the rule, for community fundraising currently, whereas the direct to donor fundraising, I think, would be where I would personally commit my time and effort. Oh, and I was going to add, I'd also go for online rather than SMS if you were having to pick, purely because the time lag between SMS donation and getting your payout is quite high. And just, I think there are, more options and more flexibility if you go for online. You can embed it in different ways and do much more testing.
I think Caroline answered everything there. And much of this is opinion based. I think just being clear in your own understanding of what benefits you're looking for, and then making an assessment according to which of these routes would best meet those requirements. I think it's quite a difficult question to answer on a broad range of organisation types. I think you've got to be quite specific and almost demanding as to what your requirements need to be.
Okay, thank you both. Emma asks, is there a good way to combine data on donors and their interactions on social media?
So you can get tools such as Segment are ones which can do that. I think there are solutions to it, but I think also ask yourself why. What's the outcome that you want to get from it? Is it a case of trying to understand if people have engaged with us, engaging on your posts, or what is it that you're trying to measure? But yeah, I believe that there's quite a few different platforms, and you should be able to get, if you're using something like Sprout Social or Hootsuite or whatever solution you have for managing multiple social media accounts, there should be ways that you can export that data and try and align it to your supporter underlying database. Sorry, I'm getting increasingly gravelly now.
So you had a big part of the webinar, Caroline. You did a brilliant job. That's why. Grab yourself some water. Again, reiterating Caroline's response, really, I think it depends on whether or not as an organisation you're in that build or buy mode. And by buy, it may mean consume rather than physically buying a particular solution. There are solutions both in the build and buy, without question, and I would suggest taking that broader look at what does your end-to-end solution look like, what are those requirements, and where does that component fit. And it may well be, and for most people it may well be, that it makes sense to consume, but there is also the opportunity to buy. And AWS of course has many potential elements that could support that solution from an analytics perspective. So I think taking that broad view.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you both. Our next question is from Louise, who asks if you can recommend a good CRM system for a medium-sized charity.
I would look at what off-the-shelf SaaS products are available, which is my go-to answer for most things. But I think when you think about CRM, I actually think that people lose the actual meaning of the acronym. So what is the customer relationship that you need to manage? Is it a case of you're managing inbound donor queries and things like that? Then you can get a few sort of smaller components such as Freshdesk for your inbound comms. It's good. But yeah, there are a few different options that are out there. I've just seen that someone else has mentioned Donify. I believe that one's a pretty strong one and very reasonably priced. So.
Great, thank you. Amy asks, is there a checklist we should be looking at for buying or sort of signing up to when we're approaching crowdfunding platforms? They've been approached by a company which isn't very well known, and Amy's a bit skeptical, but with the promises of raising, lots of money, their fundraisers are keen, but not seeing the potential pitfalls of doing due diligence. And I think that's a very valuable question that maybe a lot of our charities are going to want the answer to.
I think this comes down to what your organisational processes look like for the way that you procure or sign up to services or take agreements with any type of organisation. I don't think there's a specific checklist I could necessarily point you towards, but I think it's dead easy to say to use common sense, right? But the reality is that common sense is perceptive. It's different to individuals. It's based on experience and the type of organisations that we work for, perhaps. So I would initially recommend look internally as to what are those internal processes, if they exist, and if not, then perhaps reaching out to some of your counterparts across the sector, or indeed reaching out directly to organisations or develop relationships with organisations like ourselves who may be able to offer a view. But in terms of would we provide a specific recommendation or a checklist to follow, I'm not sure that necessarily exists. I apologies if that wasn't 100% the answer that someone was hoping for, but I think you've just got to be very aware of your own expectations or your organisational expectations of what you're signing up to. And
I think especially with any product which is going to be processing your donations, getting an understanding of what's the journey that money is taking. So in the example I gave earlier around working with RTE and the Community Foundation for Ireland, we had that the Stripe account we were using was Community Foundation for Ireland. Like, our organisation didn't touch that money at any point. We wouldn't want to. It's too much. Our bank accounts would cry. So making sure that you're really confident with how the pricing works, what their model is, whether it's a price per donation model or if it's just a flat fee for using the platform, and just how does it, follow the money, I think is sort of the biggest red flag, especially if you're a little bit concerned that you're not sure how of the organisation.
Okay, great. Thank you both. I think some valuable pointers there. and sort of, be wary as much as you can, try to do as much research as you can, I'd probably add. Okay, so Simon from ClickSargent asks, do you have advice on easy to use donation form providers that increase conversions?
Off the top of my head, I'll be honest, Caroline might have a response here, perhaps. Off the top of my head, no, but it's something that I'm sure we could, as I say, we work with a large number of partners. There may well be a partner specifically that we can speak to try and support looking at that for you. My recommendation, reach out after the session today and we can have a conversation to see whether or not we can make an introduction or identify somebody that we could perhaps make an introduction to. Off the top of my head, I'll be really honest, I don't have a response, but an answer anyway, but I'm sure there will be something that exists.
Yeah, and likewise, happy for you to reach out to us. I can give some advice based on what we've done from having worked in custom build options, which we did at Comic Relief. But in terms of just off-the-shelf solutions, I think there are so many of them. I think that is one of the pitfalls in terms of SaaS, is that you are confined by how that product is designed, and you don't necessarily have that much customization options. So it depends on what level. So if you're at a really high level of traffic and conversion is being a big issue for you, then it may be worth looking into whether investing in customization is worthwhile. But if you're a smaller organization, I do think using one of the off-the-shelf options which are available, I mean, even Just Giving has a standard donate journey. They've got great UX designers and stuff like that who have done a lot of work on that. So yeah, it depends on the scale of your organization and what you think you're missing out on financially. Like, is it worth investing in that customization?
Great. Okay, thank you both. So our next question is sort of similar. Suzanne asks if you can recommend a plugin donations provider that asks the gift aid question up front rather than at the end. They feel that they're currently missing out on gift aid pledges because of the flow, so that might be quite a valuable one as well.
I don't have like a top of my mind recommendation for that, but I know with the Comic Relief custom build, we had it. The gift aid question was before your transaction, and we saw I think around an 80% conversion to saying yes to gift aid through that form, compared to whereas we had our marketing preferences after the transaction is complete, and that was because the priority for that form needs to be revenue and then marketing being secondary. But happy to pick up with that question if she wants to contact me directly and I can chat her through.
Great, thank you very much. And our next question is sort of similar from Joel from Active Prospect, and Joel asks, what would be a reasonable sort of ballpark conversion rate for visitor to transaction?
It's like hard to say, but as in if you've got quite a direct ask, it depends on what the what your full end-to-end journey is. As again, benchmarking on previous experience with the Comic Relief, we typically saw around 40%, based on the sort of night TV conversion of when people come to the site. That could probably be greatly improved. But I think it depends on what's driven the traffic to your site. And that's, again, if you aren't, it's about really hooking up with your comms team, because if your ask is donate and they land and then you're getting if they bother to click on something which is clearly saying come and donate, and then you're getting a 5% conversion rate, something's very wrong with that page. But if the thing that's driven them to your site wasn't actually anything to do with donation, then 5% would probably be seen as quite good. So I think it is about really hooking up with your marketing team if they are separate. I imagine there's a few people here who are wearing 6 hats, but yeah, having that goal set from the point of marketing to point of transaction. Apologies that I can't just have a aim for 10, but yeah, so I think it depends on your activity, but always just benchmark where you currently are as your starting point, and then have improving that as your goal, rather than saying we need to hit 20% because, what if you can hit 50? So that's a slightly roundabout way to say, I apologize, I don't have a number for you, but hopefully that was helpful.
I think that's taking it from somebody that's a bit of an expert in this, having done what Caroline did for the past X number of years with Comic Relief and other organisations. I guess the only thing I would just add into the mix is sometimes it's also worth looking at that overall visitor journey. How easy does a user find it once they get onto your website? Are there any issues that are slowing down the way that someone navigates through your website? And that can be technology related as well as from a user experience perspective in terms of design. So sometimes it's worth just kind of taking a step back and almost the umbrella view of your website, just to make sure that there aren't any underlying issues that are preventing that conversion because people are frustrated or finding it too slow to load, etc. And again, we can potentially help in that space, but it's just sometimes worth stepping back and making sure it's not just about is the right graphic in the right place, delivering the right message at the right time.
Thank you both. It sounds like there's just so many aspects to sort of weigh up. You have to take like a kind of holistic approach as opposed to zeroing in on particular things. And I guess that's charity life all over, isn't it? Take the holistic kind of approach.
I was going to add to Steve's point there as well, just in order to measure that full end-to-end journey, that's where it is really worth just looking at, if you've got Google Analytics as an example, making sure it is set up right so that you can look at your conversion funnel. And you can see if the biggest drop-off is on your gift aid page, then that needs work. Or if it's that all of your recommended amounts that someone can donate are too high, you might be able to recognize those behaviors and then do some testing using tools like Google Optimize to be able to say, okay, we believe that we're asking too much on our recommended values. Maybe we could test making that lower and see what that does to conversion rate. So.
Brilliant, thank you. So Francis asks, what do you think about payroll giving? Francis works at a mental health charity and is wondering if they could get support from the NHS via payroll giving.
I think it's really cool. I've never actually worked, so Comic Relief didn't do it when I was working there, but just as a premise of things that I think more charities should do. And I don't know whether it's actually just trying to raise awareness to end donors that it exists and it's something that you can sign up for. I think it's pretty cool.
Great, thank you. Okay, so some more sort of process type questions. Mill from Open City asks if you have any recommendations on a good fit between data management systems and online giving platforms if the organisation manages fundraising contacts and donation systems separately. And they're apologising if you've partly answered this already, because I think there's a lot of overlap in the kind of things charities want to know. So thank you both for answering all the versions of our questions.
I think it's just, if you say from my recommendation earlier, there are some tools you can use which help centralize your data once they're in different systems. And I think as well, this is an area where it can be worth, the savings you have from not building certain systems from scratch, where the sort of value of investing in development work is bringing the data alignment in. So it might be that there's not an immediate, I use segment.com as an example where you can sort of plug and go with certain examples, but there is some, you can do it with development time. And I think having like a real awareness that like the value that you will unlock by importing all your data into one place is probably worth some custom development, and just seeing your overall architecture of being, well, I've saved money by using this SaaS product here, rather than having lots of bespoke development everywhere, but stitching together your different services, being a place which is worthwhile to invest in.
And again, I agree completely with what Caroline said there. We AWS have a number of services that support what I think this person is getting at in terms of what it is they're trying to achieve. But I think actually looking at that broader end to end, what does that overall journey look like? what other data potentially exists within the organization, because as we spoke about during the webinar, data is key to the success in almost every area of an organization, charitable or otherwise. So understanding the value of that data, understanding how you use that data is critical. And it may be that there's an opportunity there to have a conversation around what is that data, how does it look, how can that be used, because it may be that some of that solution already exists for you. As Caroline says, a bit of development in order to unlock some of that data, or the way that you use that data, and then plugging that into third-party solutions in order to make that data usable in a meaningful way for that specific use case. Yeah, I'm more than happy to follow up directly with a conversation around that if that would be useful.
Great, thank you. So we're now on to our final question, which I'll read out in just a tick. And I just want to say we're just past 2 p.m. So if anyone has any burning questions, I think you might have a minute or so to get them in. With that being said, I'll jump onto the final one. It comes from Ellie, who asks if you have any advice on making different ways of receiving donations easily on their WordPress website. Any sort of good add-ons you might advise with WordPress?
I've never actually worked with a WordPress site, so apologies. It's a no from me, but potentially, hopefully, someone else in the chat might have had experience. Apologies for that.
Yeah, I think WordPress is I think it powers something like 2/3, doesn't it, of websites around the globe. It's massively used platform in terms of the solution, the software itself, housed in all sorts of systems. I think there's a huge community that could possibly support that in terms of some research online, reaching out again to fellow members of the charity community. I'm sure there'll be, as Caroline said, people that are on this webinar today that might be able to reach out and help. Or alternatively, again, that umbrella view of looking at the overall strategy. Is it a case of actually looking at third-party providers, and is there an opportunity in terms of software solutions or plugins that they also provide? I think the answers there are possibly almost endless, to be honest. It's about defining exactly what it is that you need, and then the research that goes into finding the solution.
I think, yeah, to add to that as well, there is I think that people can get very fixated on the idea that a donation is a very different transaction to a normal payment, and it's really not. So if there is a WordPress sort of off-the-shelf Stripe implementation, for example, or the sort of a plugin for using Stripe there, you can then build sort of the select amount and that sort of thing without it being too challenging. I think that's what sort of a big recommendation for me is. There are a lot of problems which have been solved for the non-charity sector, which you can apply within the charity context, and it will often. That's also where you might be able to flag yourself for charity discounts and things like that, whereas charity-specific products will often not offer charity discounts because that's their entire market. Whereas, yeah, you can get some really good deals by using software which isn't specifically targeted at charities.
Great. Okay, that's a brilliant tip at the end there. Yeah. So as we are sort of in the charity sector, don't be shy of approaching the business world to see, what they're using and if we can benefit from that at all. I just want to say there's a lot of very helpful bits of advice and information in the chat function. So if any attendees haven't had a chance to look at that, just have a bit of a browse. You might find some nuggets of information that might be useful for you. As we come up to the end, I just wanted to thank Steve and Caroline once again, and all of our attendees for joining us this afternoon to talk about digital fundraising. We have all the contact information that you would want for Steve, Caroline, our team. So please, if there's anything we've left uncovered or you'd like more details about, please get in touch. The other thing I'd like to talk about is what we have coming up next. So our next webinar is on the 11th of Feb, and that's going to sort of look at the trends that we're expecting to come up during 2021. And then with Charity Digital, the big one is going to be our Be More Digital virtual conference of 2021. All sort of, conferences have gone online, and this is our sort of flagship one. It's going to run for 3 days. So please join us as we embark on this big, ambitious, very exciting virtual conference. Before we completely wrap up and say goodbye, do you have any final words, either of Steve or Caroline, or?
I guess don't be overwhelmed. Right? That's the takeaway message. This needn't be overly complicated. It's just about thinking about how you would like to use a service yourself, imagine yourself as the donor, I guess is the takeaway message, and reach out for support. Ourselves and others are out there to support you on that journey. And thank you.
Okay, so that's it. That's goodbye from all of us here, and I hope to see you all very soon. Bye.